A homemade southern biscuit, hot out of the oven with a buttery, crispy exterior and flaky, buttery interior, is my favorite breakfast food. I've had amazing homemade biscuits all my life growing up in the American South with several southern baking grandmas. Over the years, I have created my own version using a little less fat, but with a flavor enhancement using Greek yogurt. I make these biscuits or variation of these biscuits about every 10 days for my husband. He absolutely loves them. I'm excited to share them with you today. What makes these biscuits a little different from the traditional southern version is that I use a little less fat, specifically butter, to make them a little less heavy on the hips. I also replace some of the milk with Greek yogurt or sour cream to create a buttery, tangy flavor profile. Let's check them out. For the ingredients, you'll need all-purpose flour, salt, baking powder, butter, Greek yogurt, and milk. You can use any kind of milk. In fact, I often just use water and the biscuits still turn out great. Biscuits are quick to make since they don't include yeast, so go ahead and preheat your oven to 450 degrees. A hot oven will ensure a crispy, buttery exterior. Then you want to line a large baking sheet with parchment paper or silicone mats to make it easier to remove the biscuits and also for a quick cleanup. And set that aside. In a very large bowl, we're going to add 480 grams, which is 4 cups of all-purpose flour. If you're measuring your flour using a measuring cup, be sure to fluff and scoop and level off the flour in the container. And we're just adding the dry ingredients here. If using an unsalted fat like unsalted butter or shortening, you're going to add 9 grams, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I'm using salted butter in my recipe today, so I'm going to decrease the salt to 6 grams, which is 1 teaspoon. And we'll add 30 grams, 2 tablespoons of baking powder. And then you're just going to stir until the ingredients are just well dispersed. Many southern biscuit recipes use shortening, but I prefer the richness of butter. So in this recipe, we're going to add 113 grams, which is 4 ounces or 8 tablespoons or 1 stick of cold diced butter. You want that butter to be cold so that as it cuts in, it keeps its shape and then it'll create that flaky crust. Again, you can use salted or unsalted. Now, I'm going to use a pastry cutter. You could use knives or forks, whatever you have available. You can also use a food processor and blend just until the butter is in small pieces. And with a pastry cutter, that's what we're looking for, is just cutting in that butter until we just have those small pieces. Once your butter is the size of small peas, then you can stir in any optional mix-ins into the flour mixture. Like for example, if you want a savory version, you can add about 1 cup of your favorite grated cheese, or you can add a 1/4 cup of freshly chopped chives, or 1 tablespoon of dried chives. I love adding cheese and chives to this recipe, but between the tangy yogurt, the butter, and the cheese and the chives, it's like a baked potato, but bread. If you want a sweetened version, add in some chocolate chips. Why not? Chocolate chips and bread for breakfast? Yes, please. In a 2-cup measuring cup, I'm going to add in 255 grams, which is 1 cup of Greek yogurt. And this is actually non-fat. You can use whatever level of fat that you want. I try to make these a little bit on the light side, these biscuits, but you could, of course, add as much as you'd like. You could also use sour cream in place of the Greek yogurt, just as long as it's plain yogurt. So then in another measuring cup, I've measured out 230 milliliters, which is 1 cup of, I'm using whole milk today. It depends on what I have. Often I just use water because yogurt or sour cream automatically adds the richness and flavor, so you could get by with just water. However, that whole milk adds an increased level of richness. So when I have milk, I use it instead, but water works just fine. You'd be surprised. So I'm just going to stir the mixture until it's smooth. If you have buttermilk, you can use 472 milliliters, which is 2 cups of that in place of the yogurt, milk, or water combination. Then just make a well in the center of your flour mixture so we have a place to put our liquid. Then you're just going to pour this milk or water yogurt combination in the center there. And then just carefully Stir together the ingredients until your flour is just moistened. Now remember, this is a bread, so we want this to be relatively stiff. We don't need it like a cake consistency. Once you've stirred about as much as you can get this to mix together, I usually just make sure my hands are clean, and then I just start digging in to get all that flour and bits of butter that are hanging out at the bottom, and just make sure that they're sort of mixed in to the dough. Okay, and that's what your dough should look like. You can see all these little bits of butter throughout. So depending on how much time you have, or your mood in my case sometimes, or just what you feel like doing, there are two methods for dividing the biscuits. So you can make a quick drop biscuit, which you could just use a simple spoon. I'm going to use a measuring cup, that way I can accurately measure my biscuit dough. And then I just scoop out 1/4 cup of biscuit dough. It comes out as simple with your hands, or you can use a spoon to get it out. If you wanted to shape it, you can. If not, just drop it on the pan, and that would be a drop biscuit. Okay, I try to make it a little bit pretty, but you don't have to. Drop biscuits are simply scoop and drop. That's simple. I'll show you one more time for the 1/4 cup drop biscuit. You're going to place your biscuits, whether the drop biscuits or the traditional method, on your prepared baking sheet, and they should be close to each other. I'm going to be able to get 4 on my baking sheet across, so they're close together. But biscuits should touch when they bake. They're traditional, so it's okay if they do. Okay, so now let's look at the cutout method. Okay, the traditional method is we want to knead it a little bit, make the tops nice and pretty flat. In order to do that, you need to flour a work surface. Then just scoop your dough out onto the work surface. I'm going to do just a quick little knead, just to make sure everything is kind of cohesive, no weird creases or anything. And then you can just flatten dough out to about 1 inch thick. I love that you can spot all the dough pieces in here. I'm using a 2.5 inch biscuit or cookie cutter. You could also use a small glass or anything that's round. And then you're just going to cut out dough rounds. Notice how easily they come out, they don't stick. And then just place them on your pan. You'll notice as I'm cutting these out, I have a little bit of dough that's left over. So when you have those little scraps, just leave them as they are, don't worry. And we're going to come back, knead the dough together, and cut out more biscuits, just like this. Did a quick little knead. Keep that flour on the surface so that when you cut these out, they don't stick to the surface. Same thing, flatten out to about 1 inch thick, and then continue cutting out. For that last biscuit, you can just shape it how you want it, or just use it as a drop biscuit. Okay, I can usually get 20 to 22 biscuits on here. I actually have 19, so I have a few that are probably a little taller than normal, but this is what you're looking at for the amount that you can make with this recipe. Regardless of the biscuit shaping method that you use, whether it's the quick drop biscuits or the flat cut out using a biscuit cutter, once all biscuits are on the baking sheet in our preheated oven, we're going to bake them for 20 to 25 minutes or until golden brown. Our biscuits are hot out of the oven. You can eat them now and enjoy. Let's take a closer look. So notice that we had them pretty close together, and look how quickly they just separate from each other. You just sort of spin them around or pull them apart. Notice they're nice and golden brown on the bottom, nice and golden brown on top. They're going to have that crispy, crunchy exterior because of the butter. Take a look at like this one. Notice how much it rose. That's because of the baking powder, and baking powder of course has acid in it, but that little extra boost of acid from the yogurt really caused these biscuits to rise. Now these two at the end, these were our drop biscuits. Notice they don't look quite as pretty, but they are what they say they are. They're just dropped on the pan, and so they're not going to have like a pretty shape to them. But most of them have a nice flat top to them. This was that last one we did. It's sort of our butt biscuit there, the last remaining dough. I like the bread itself has a yellow tint to it because that is the butter. All right, let's tear into one of these. We'll just go right in half. Okay, look at the layers in this biscuit. That's because of the butter. Ooh, it's hot and steamy right now. They would taste incredible with a little bit of butter or some jam, whatever you want. Even some Nutella would be good on these. And as these sit, this crusty top, see how crusty that top is? It's going to soften as the bread sits. So they're best eaten now, but I usually freeze them for my husband and he eats them over the course of a couple weeks. They are buttery and tangy, but neither flavor is overpowering. These buttery, tangy biscuits are wonderful hot by themselves, of course with butter and jam. They would be great with gravy, a sausage patty, or hash browns sandwiched in the middle. Eat them as you would any other biscuit. Store them at room temperature for up to 3 days. For longer storage, as soon as they cool, place them in a freezer bag and freeze so you have homemade biscuits every day of the week. Just heat as many as you'd like from frozen in the microwave for 30 to 45 seconds and enjoy. This is truly one of my regular homemade breads. These biscuits have such simple ingredients and are easy to make. A little lighter on the hips too if you use water or fat-free milk. Making a large batch allows you to have homemade bread every day of the week without all the work every day of the week. We hope you give these biscuits a try and enjoy them as much as we do. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing. Until next time, go bake the world.